Hey, everybody. It's your Spartan Shadows podcast host. I'm Chris. I'm joined with Zach and Emmett. And we're here today bringing you a bonus episode discussing football position groups and getting the roster breakdown for you guys. We want to start doing these shorter videos just to kind of give you a little bit of hype going into the football season, maybe clear up some positional questions you may have about who's on the roster and who's competing for jobs. So we're going to do a couple of these bonus episodes midweek between our regular episodes to get you some extra football content leading up to season kickoff on at the end of August. What are we, 36 days? As Emmett tweeted today. So we're getting close. So today's position groups, we're going to have two kind of groups. We're going to do the quarterbacks, and we're also going to break down the specialists. So kicker, punters, long snappers. We have a feeling the closer we get to football season, the more football views we will get. So we want to save some of the more hotly contested positional battles and bigger position groups for closer to the season. Quarterbacks, obviously, who we're getting as QB1, probably pretty familiar through the room. There's not a lot of competition in the specialist room either. There is one battle that we'll highlight for you. But yeah, we appreciate everybody tuning in for this quick little bonus content. Zach, Em, and I appreciate you guys joining me. And let's get into it. We'll start with the quarterbacks. The quarterbacks on roster, obviously Aiden Childs, he is going to be quarterback number one, but we have Aiden Childs leading the room. Other quarterbacks on roster are Alessio Milivojevic, Leo Hannon, Rylan Jesse, and Atticus Cardane. So that's your quarterback room for this year, 5 on the roster. Obviously, not all 5 are probably going to dress each week, but those are the 5 listed on the roster. Like I said, Aiden Childs is QB1, barring an injury or something crazy happening. Guys, we'll start with just your general thoughts on the room, and then I'll ask maybe a couple of follow-up questions for you. So what are we thinking on the quarterback room and its depth?
Yeah, I think it has a good amount of depth. Obviously, you have Aiden Childs, the returning star from last year. Actually, one of the most experienced stars in the Big Ten, at least playing in the Big Ten, which is crazy if you look at the stat. He's probably one of the youngest stars, but one of the most experienced ones, which is quite interesting. But that's obviously kind of the day and age that we live in college athletics with the transfer portal, with obviously COVID kind of getting through that age and stuff like that as well. So definitely really like the position of quarterback. Obviously, Aiden Childs is going to be QB number one. That's no question. He's going to be QB number one as long as he is at MSU. The biggest real question here is obviously what Aiden Childs is going to look like this year. I think he has a mix of trying to make some plays that he made last year, but trying to cut down on the turnovers. I think obviously the biggest issue last year was throwing interceptions, and he kind of solved that towards the end of last year, but he was also a little bit, in my opinion, too safe with some of his plays. I think he needs to kind of navigate the difference between being too safe, but also being too loose with the ball. And I think at times you saw that. I think we've seen some throws, seen some plays with his legs throughout games like Oregon, throughout games earlier on the year where he didn't have very much pass protection. He was able to use his legs to either extend the play and get the ball down the field or use his legs to get a first down. So that's one thing that I'm really going to be interested in watching. The backup spot is going to be interesting as well. I'm assuming it's probably going to be Alessio. If you have to say the best nickname out of everyone in the QB room, absolutely, and for sure goes to A Millie. Like if this is a quarterback battle is based on nicknames, A Millie is my starting quarterback 99 out of 100 times, and the only reason why Aiden Childs would be the one time is because guess what? We saw what he can do last year. So nicknames at that point doesn't necessarily matter to me, but I think it's a good spot that MSU is in. They have some veteran experience on this roster. They have some young guys on this roster. They have some guys that have been in the room for a little bit with Alessio and Aiden. And then you have a guy like Leo Hannon that shows potential. And then obviously you have a couple other guys behind him as well. So overall, I think it's a pretty good room.
Yeah, overall, I think, like Zach said, Aiden Child, the question in this room is how high is Aiden Child ceiling? How much will Aiden progress this year? And I think part of that is definitely aided by having a revamped offensive line group, a revamped wide receiver core, and also you have quarterback coach John Boyer back with the program he was with Oregon State. and was Aiden Childs' quarterback coach his first year. So obviously, those are all factors going in to help Aiden Childs and his development. I think you see him take a step forward this year. Do I think you see him necessarily work his way into draftable range? I would say if he declared, he probably would be a guy that gets you a late round flyer, but I think he would be told from most people in his circle to stay in school for another year. That's why you see this John Foster of Wide Left said that in his opinion, Childs is starting as a top 5 prospect for the 2027 class. Number 1 quarterback, but that is assuming Arch Manning declares in the end of the season. So that's obviously a ton of praise. But I necessarily, as said by former Michigan State coach Nick Saban, don't buy the rat poison because we saw Brian Lewerke heading into his second year as a starter being listed as a top 15 draft selection. Even last year, we saw Malik Spencer being listed as a fringe 2025 NFL draft first-round candidate. He's coming back to school this year for a reason. He has something to prove. So that is obviously something to note. In my opinion, the biggest question facing this group is who your quarterback 3 is going to be. I believe you're pretty entrenched with Aiden Childs as quarterback 1. Alessio Milivojevic was the 3rd quarterback on the travel roster last year, remained that way, ended up getting 1 rep at the end of the year. Yes, I know it was an interception, but he still got to have that game experience. Obviously, the staff trusted enough to not screw it up or anything. I want to say, and everyone's been talking about how he's taking steps heading into his redshirt freshman campaign. So Alessio Milivojevic is firmly your quarterback 2. Then it becomes a matter of Rylan Jesse, 3-time Scout Team Player of the Week last year. Leo Hannon, who was a 3-star, could have risen farther, but had an injury end his year early. So the question becomes, do you ride safe with that red shirt and not have that chance for playing time? Or do you really try to make him, do you try to have him let it fly and have him at that quarterback 3? Obviously, Alessio Milivojevic was quarterback 3 last year. He still had that red shirt, so obviously the quarterback 3 is just going to be, you really get to see how the depth chart falls. Then as far as Atticus Carradine goes, I do not see him necessarily seeing the field this year unless it is late in the game as a reserve during a home game, or if you see it as you might see him on field for special teams or something, because I know he has worked out with wide receivers before.
Yeah, absolutely. And Aiden Childs, like I said, obviously potential to be all Big Ten if things go the correct way and MSU has a good season. I know he's gained some weight. He's looking more confident. So a lot of hype coming with him back. Emily Alessio, I think, is also my quarterback too. Leo Hannon does have a lot of potential, I will say. I know the injury cut him short a little bit, but he's has a lot of upside. Hopefully he's fully healed. I would imagine he would redshirt just to play it safe, but you never know. If he's fully healthy and is getting some good reps in at practice and performing well, they may want him on the roster. So we'll see. But yeah, this room's probably as cut and dry as pretty much any on the roster. You know what you're getting.
We haven't actually at the first one. We were going through the roster talking about specialists, and then we're like, what's the position group that is most settled? Quarterback. So conclusion tonight, because we all know Aiden Childs will be, barring anything drastic, I'm knocking on wood right now, is going to be taking your snaps as quarterback 1 at the beginning of at the end of August.
Yeah. So
think about
training camp, end of August for game day.
Exactly. And if the only other position that we're going to talk about tonight that I think you can almost guarantee for the most part is punter with Ryan Eckley.
Yep.
Completely agree.
And that'll be a good transition, Zach, into our specialist groups. We'll do all 3 specialist positions together. I'll list the roster here, and we'll kind of break down that. The kicking spot is up for grabs. That is going to be a battle going into fall camp. The kickers listed on the roster, we'll start there. Tariq Ahmed Basic, Martin Connington, and Blake Sislow. Punter Ryan Eckley obviously is going to be your punter 1, barring anything crazy. He's listed in some publications as a potential preseason All-American. He's a very good punter, and he will be amongst the leaders in the Big Ten, if not the nation, in punting. The other punter on the roster, Carson Voss, another talented punter, but is going to be behind Ryan Eckley. And then in the long snappers on the roster, Caden Schickel, who's coming off his lower body injury that happened in October last year. He was the long snapper before that happened. And then we also have Jack Wills, Aiden DeCorte, and Sam Edwards. So those are your long snappers. My quick thoughts on this, like I said, Ryan Eckley's your guy at punter. I would assume as long as Caden Schickel is healthy, he's going to take the majority of the long snapping duties. There are some potential with Jack Wills to fill in if he's not healthy, or even Aiden DeCorte, Sam Edwards, I guess, too, even though you're probably going to see him utilized in other roles a little bit. But the kicking battle is the one that is, I would say, up for grabs. If I had to pick an early favorite in my book, I would say Martin Connington. I really like him. But Tariq Ahmed-Basic has shown some potential as well. And the new guy, Blake Sislow, I don't know a lot about him, I'll be honest. He was just recently added to the roster. But he was brought in for a reason, and we'll see if he can make any headway in the kicking battle. But it should come down to either Connington or Ahmed-Basic. And whoever wins that is, could go either way, in my opinion. Guys, what do you think about the specialists overall, and what's to highlight there?
Yeah, I think you're pretty much accurate. Kind of the way I would go too. I would probably go with Connington as well. We've seen Tariq last year as well. I believe he actually might have a little bit of a stronger leg than Connington, at least from what I've seen. So that could obviously play some factor in it. But obviously, like when they're out there practicing before games, that doesn't necessarily mean everything. And obviously, that's just a small sample size to compare to like what the coaching staff probably sees on a daily basis, because obviously we're not a coach, we're not there the whole time. But it would make kind of sense to go the Connington route, and the only reason I say that is because this is a guy that they brought in, the staff brought in, and that's no shot at like Tariq at all. Like he can be really talented, but we've seen people and coaching staff that likes their guy, and sometimes it's really hard unless one guy stands out over the other. And they basically brought him from going from Oregon State to Michigan State, and yeah, I can see Connington be the guy, but it could be just like an open tryout, honestly. We've seen a lot of teams in college kind of have that. We've seen teams that have kind of a long distance kicker and a short distance kicker. Think about Nick Saban had that. Like, it's really hard to find a really good, consistent kicker. MSU has that for punter. MSU had a pretty good long snapper last year as well. It's about finding a consistent kicker, and I think once you find that, I think that would be a guy that will kind of take control. And I think Connington will probably be the first one that's given that shot. But if Tariq is given that shot, that wouldn't surprise me either.
Yeah, as far as my opinion, I would say for the long snapping battle, barring Schickel's injury taking longer to heal, you see Caden Schickel as your long snapper for the entire season, barring anything such as, I know last year he was sick during a game, couldn't practice the entire week before, toughed it out for the first half. It was a Prairie View A&M game, so around like the third or fourth touchdown, he was like, I can't do it anymore, and they're like, we're up 28 points, it's fine. And then, I would say that Schickel is going to be your long snapper one. You might see Jack Wills get some game experience depending on how the Western Michigan game goes, depending on how the Youngstown State game goes, just so the staff isn't in the same position they were last year. And then Aiden DeCorte has practiced with Central Michigan and Colorado, has yet to see game action. Just something, I would say he might be the guy who you would look at as long snapper too if an injury did happen, for example, just because he's had multiple years of long snapping at the collegiate level. That said, I do think Jack Wills would be the first guy off the bench if it's a blowout, just to try to get that game experience in. Sam Edwards really just fills in as the guy who, the last 2 years with injuries to Hank Pepper and the injury to Caden Schickel, really brought Edwards as a long snapper just because he was already dressed for the game, because I believe the Hank Pepper injury happened when it was a road game. Same thing with the Schickel injury that was at Michigan. So Edwards ends up being more your AT long snapper in a pinch. So obviously that's where I would project seeing Edwards if anything did happen, if there's blowouts, if you have issues with food poisoning, the flu, whatever. You could potentially see Sam Edwards there. I think you would see him more as an up back and a linebacker. We'll talk more about that position group for linebackers later. And then as far as the punters go, Eckley's going to be your punter one. You might see Voss get a punt either during a blowout, or during senior day, for example, if it's the game's out of hand, let the senior have his moment. You might see him play against Western Michigan. He started for the Broncos for a year before transferring to MSU because that was his dream college. You might see him get that moment if it's a game out of hand. You might see him make that Spartan debut. I know he also did some spot duties as a holder for the second team kicking during warm-ups last year. You could see that as well. But overall, I would not expect a ton out of Carson Voss this year. I think that he has the chance if injury happens, but it's going to be hard to replace the guy who's getting preseason All-American nods. And he didn't necessarily come to Michigan State to be the starter. He came to Michigan State because it was his dream college, and that's something that's very admirable in my opinion. I went away from being an assured punter number one.
Yeah.
And then the kicking battle, looking at it, unlike Chris and Zach, I believe I'm giving the nod to Tariq Ahmed-Basic. I know that the kickers, both are very unproven. Ahmed-Basic, the extent of his kicking experience for Michigan State is 2 kickoffs and 1 point after touchdown, and that came late in the Prairie View game. But he dressed with the roster for every single game, unlike Connington. Connington was not on the travel roster last year. So at least last year, he was the one getting the starting nod. I believe Ahmed-Basic also has a slightly bigger leg than Connington. I know Connington hit a 56-yarder in high school, but he also played in Idaho, higher elevation than Michigan, obviously. And then I was blown away by watching during Big House, warm-ups in the Big House, actually. Tariq Ahmed-Basic was hitting ones from, I want to say, like 55 yards. So you have, both players have massive legs, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see one player as your kicker, one as your kickoff specialist, just because, unlike the Jonathan Kim situation we had last year, there is no assured kicker number one, and you can definitely try to test out, and if you can give them these accuracy tests of, hey, can you kick it into this corner during your kickoffs, you're going to be able to see and build up coaching trust for both of them so they have that confidence if they're needed in a game. So I would say Tariq Ahmed-Basic as kicker 1 and then Connington kicker 2. Much like Chris, I don't know a ton about Cicelo. He had no stats at Davenport during his 2 years played. He's also 2 years removed from an organized football game, at least at collegiate level. That's a little concerning. The last time he took snaps as a kicker in at least an organized setting would be, at least an organized game setting, would be his senior year of high school, and that was 2021. So that is definitely a concern, but obviously the staff sees something in him and thinks that he helps bring something to the program, and I don't know if that encourages me or concerns me about how kicking went during the spring. I know I did ask about the first media session of the year. I had asked Jonathan Smith about if there was any clear-cut favorite for the kicker, and he said they were splitting reps evenly, just alternating. So I don't know if there's any update since then. Depending on how media goes at day one, that might be a question I can ask. We'll see from there.
Yeah, and keep in mind there may be a bit of a setback with the kicking position. Jonathan Kim was an exceptionally good kicker. Let's not try to forget that. He was about as automatic. Yeah, it was about as automatic as we've had in years at MSU. So don't come into the season expecting that from whoever wins the kicking battle. But both Connington and Ahmed-Basic are talented kickers. I personally, like I said, I like Connington from what I've seen and give him a slight edge. But I don't want to make it sound like that's a knock on Tariq Ahmed-Basic either, because he does have a really big leg and a lot of talent. So most of kicking is mental too. So it's whoever really can have the confidence to come in rep after rep and get the job done, and because the talent's there for both of them. So whoever can put it together and stay consistent, I think, is who's going to win the battle. Jonathan Smith has preached consistency in special teams and from the specialists. So I think that's going to be probably the biggest deciding factor. So we'll see, but that's just kind of the breakdown. Specialists, quarterbacks, no real big surprises coming up. We'll do more of these, like I said, leading up to football season. We'll be covering the offensive and defensive lines, of course, secondary and the receivers, running backs, linebackers. We got a whole bunch of stuff to cover, and we'll maybe even hit a little bit about the coaching staff if we get time to. So appreciate everybody tuning in. That'll do it for this quick hitter. We hope you enjoy these, and let us know if you want to hear anything specific in these videos in the future. So in the meantime, enjoy this last Thursday. It's July 24th. It's officially the last Thursday without football until February because we have NFL preseason starting soon. So we're almost we're almost done with the off season. So football is right around the corner. We're excited to share this football season with you guys, and we can't wait. So in the meantime, thanks again, and go green.